Hi, hello to the end of the third section of the Web Developer course in 30 days from scratch. This section included days 5 and 6 of our study. Hello both to those who study with me on Udemy and would like to watch an additional video, and those who are not taking the course but would like to learn something new and useful. What we have been doing for the last 2 days in the course and what we will be doing in this video. In the beginning, we focused on the default styles, browser styles, and our own styles. And in this video, we will recall these topics once again. In the course, we also covered the basics of CSS. We covered what style sheets are and what cascading is. Then we moved on to the CSS grammar. We explained what a rule is, how it is built, and what are combinators used in selectors. And in this video, I would also like to do a quick revision of the CSS rules grammar. We also discussed the selectors in more detail, how to build them, what they are for, and how they work. We also worked out the most common CSS errors and showed how to find them, as well as we learned how to add CSS to a website. We've covered 3 ways of adding CSS styles and their pros and cons. Finally, we did the selectors training to make you think a little bit. In this video, we will also do some additional selectors training, so stay focused. To begin with, I would like to explain once again what the default styles are, what the browser styles are, and what our own styles are. Often these concepts are confused, so it is good to repeat it again. So the default styles. If we create an element in HTML, for example a p tag, it has many properties set by default. Among other things, the margin. The default margin for all HTML elements is 0. And these are the default styles defined in the specification. But there's also such a thing as built-in browser styles. We can think of them as the CSS style file that the browser has. And in this file, the browser has a certain margin for the body tag of 8 pixels. We often say that this is the default style, which is not entirely true. The default style gives a margin of 0 to this element. Then the built-in browser style gives it 8 pixels. All modern browsers have the same specific built-in styles. We need to know that the built-in browser styles override the default styles. The browser first gives all created elements the default styles, and then overrides them with the styles built into the browser. And we should override the browser styles with our own styles. So in practice it looks like this, starting from the bottom. Default styles, margin 0, built-in browser styles, margin 8 pixels, and finally our own styles, for example margin 20 pixels. This means that our own styles override all the other styles. What you can notice on this slide, because the rest of the styles are struck through. Our styles are the most important, and this should be remembered. Now let's recall the structure of the CSS rule. Quick CSS syntax repeat. The rule is the basic cell of the CSS language. It consists of a selector, in this example a p tag that is a child of a section. Then we have the declaration block represented by the curly brackets. And in the declaration block between the curly brackets we have the declarations. In our case we have 2 declarations. Each declaration consists of a property name and a value separated by a colon. And each declaration should end with a semicolon. The selector is a way to refer to each matching element we want to style. These elements are found by the browser. There must be a colon between the property and the value. And there should be a semicolon at the end of each declaration. The semicolon is not required at the end of the last declaration of the rule, but it is better to put it because it can avoid the error if we add a new declaration to the rule after some time and forget to add the semicolon to the previous one. Therefore, it is best to end each declaration with a semicolon. We should also remember to avoid empty declaration blocks and place the properties in the rule from the most important to the least important. Practice and common sense will help us with this. Now let's move on to our test. I will give you a moment to complete each task. You will need to create the appropriate selector using combinators. So let's recall what combinators are. Combinators help to determine the relationship between the elements in HTML structure. As we can see on this slide, we have space between the elements, which is considered as a descendant. So in our example, we have img, that is a descendant of a div, that is a descendant of a header. At the second example, we have the greater than sign, which is a child. So in our example, we have take the p tag, which is a child of a div tag. In our third example, we have a plus sign, which means the first younger brother. So as we can see in our third example, we have a p tag, that is a first younger brother of the h1 tag. And in our last example, we have the tilde sign, which means every younger brother, not only the first one. So in our last example, we have a div tag, that is a younger brother of another div tag. And it doesn't mean that it has to be right in front of it. I talked more about the combinators in a course. If you are not familiar with this topic, I encourage you to take part in my course or search for the information on the internet. So the combinators help to determine the relationship between the elements in the HTML structure. As we can see on this slide, we have a space, which is a descendant. We have a plus sign, which is the first younger brother. We have a tilde sign, which means every younger brother. And a greater than sign, which means a child, which is a direct descendant. The first task, very simple, no combinators required. What selector are we going to use here to match both div tags? A very simple selector. Here I will not give much time for the answer, which you will get right away. It is of course a div selector, so the element selector. We indicate a specific element. As we know, the selector applies to all matching elements, so in this case it will be all the div tags on our website. Now we need a little more time. What selector are we going to use here? Remember to use the combinators. Know that we can't change anything to the HTML code. Now how to write the selector to refer to the EM tag. Note that there's a second EM tag in the HTML code, which we don't want to include in our selector. I leave you a moment to think, and here's my answer. The answer to this question may be this. Take an EM tag that is a descendant of a P tag that is a descendant of a div tag. You could also use a child combinator in this case. Take the EM tag, which is a child of a P tag, which is a child of the div tag. Or even write the selector like this. Take the EM tag, which is a descendant of a P tag, which is a first younger brother of the H1 tag. Or even take the EM tag, which is a child of a P tag, which is a first younger brother of the H1 tag. Remember that there are usually many ways to get to a specific element. Another task. What selector will we use to refer only to that particular div tag? Pause the video and think for a moment. The correct answer may look like this. Take a div tag that is a child of another div tag. Only one div tag in our HTML code meets this condition. In this case, you could also use these selectors. Take a div tag, which is a descendant of a div tag, which is a descendant of another div tag. Or even take a div tag that is a child of another div tag, that is a descendant of another div tag. Another task is ahead of us. Pause the video, think for a moment, and I'll be back in a second with an answer. The answer to that question may be this. Take the section tag, which is the first younger brother of the nav tag. If we wanted to select both sections, we could use these selectors for example. We could use the element selector, which would be only a section, or we could write it like this. Take the section, which is any brother of the nav tag. Time for the last task for today. Pause the video, give yourself a moment, and try to find the correct selector. My answer would be this. Take any element with the class of red that is a child of the div tag. But that is not the only correct answer. We have many options in this example, and here are a few that will also work. Take any element with the class of red, which is a child of a div. Take the p tag with the class of red, which is a child of a div. Take the p tag with the class of red, which is a descendant of a div. Take any element with the class of red that is a descendant of a div. Take any element with the class of red that is a descendant of any other element with the class of red. Take the p tag, which is a descendant of any element with the class of red, and many, many more. Thank you very much for meeting today. I invite you to the next section of the course if you study with me on Udemy. If not, I invite you to the YouTube for a bonus material to the next section. Because I always try to make additional materials on YouTube interesting both for course participants and YouTube viewers who do not participate in the course. Thanks again and see you soon.